Hello, welcome to the Analyst Inside Cricket with me, Simon Hughes.
And I'm Simon Mann.
And we're joined by a special guest today, Stephen Finn, the former Middlesex and less so Sussex and primarily England fast bowler, who now, of course, is a commentator and author. So he's got a new book coming out shortly called The Ashes Files, which sounds very interesting. And it's good to have you on, Finny, today because you are part of the TNT commentary team covering the Ashes, and this podcast is sponsored by TNT. So thank you to TNT for their support. And you can watch all England's white ball matches in New Zealand, the T20s which are just finished and the ODIs to come, as well as the Ashes, exclusively live on TNT. You can reach TNT by going to either EE or Sky or Virgin, and also get it on Discovery Plus as well. But of course, a subscription is required. You need to be 18 plus, and terms and conditions apply. Finny, just tell us what are your plans then? So you're heading out to Australia for the Ashes. When are you going, and what are you expecting?
Yeah, I'm going on the 17th of November, so I'll land a few days before the first test starts, and I'm excited. I'm optimistic as a former England player about England's opportunity to win down there for the first time in 15 years. And I'm just fascinated to see how it all plays out. The media circus has begun. And
that's right.
I think that there's a lot of noise already around the series, which is fantastic. And yeah, I really am optimistic about England's opportunity to win.
How much optimism do you have now compared to, and we'll talk about this a bit more in detail relating to your book later, but how much optimism now compared to how you were feeling 15 years ago, 2010-11?
I suppose I was so naive 15 years ago to what it was all about that I didn't really have any feelings going into that. I was just excited and lucky to be in an England team that was full of great players. But also I was wary of the fact that England had been hammered effectively every time that they'd been there in the last 28 years. It was this weird mix of emotions of me going there completely wide-eyed as to what I was to expect, but also with all the older players telling me this is going to be the hardest tour of your life. So it was, it was this weird position between the two. But I just remember being so excited, 21, going to Australia for the first ever time, playing in an Ashes, which is something that I'd grown up watching and loving, and just having a great opportunity, I think, was the mindset that I had, which when you look at the rest of your career, that's kind of a mindset that you chase and probably never actually quite make it back to.
When you look back, was it the toughest tour of your life, or was it actually just fantastic, just one great experience from start to finish? Although you did have that situation in the middle where you were leading wicket taker and then you were left out, weren't you?
Yeah. No, that wasn't the toughest tour of my life. The one in 2013-14 was by far harder for everyone on the trip because Mitchell Johnson had his way with us, and I got sent home during the one-day series that came after.
But Australia in general, Finny, is Australia the toughest tour?
I think it is. I mean, India is a very difficult tour to do, and I've done a 5 test match series there. I've done a 4 and a 5 test match series there, but the 5 in particular was difficult because again we were being hammered, and that makes it 10 times harder. But Australia is a tough tour because when things snowball, they snowball badly. The press can get on your back. You're not really enjoying the country or the culture that is to be enjoyed down there. So, Australia and India I'd probably have on parity, but for different reasons.
Actually, that's a really interesting point you raised there because, obviously totally different conditions playing-wise, but atmosphere and culture-wise, Australia, as you said, I've been on tours, following tours, both successful and unsuccessful, and you can feel the difference in the way the Australians public and the media treat you as cricketers and even as supporters, journalists. But in India, I guess you can get detached from the cricket a bit. I mean, there isn't that same sort of tsunami of aggression from the press and, from the people. I mean, the Indian people are so kind of pleased to see you, aren't they, wherever you are, as an English cricketer or a cricket fan. And so you don't feel that sort of hostility, I suppose, that you would get in Australia if things are going badly.
No, you don't. And yeah, when you're in India, you don't have as much freedom to be able to explore the country. I think when you're there as part of the England team, I think you end up a lot of time in hotel rooms and hotel lobbies, which is a very different experience to being in Australia, where you can freely just leave the hotel and walk around. But yeah, it's different. You walk into Starbucks and there's some fella in there telling you you're useless and you're rubbish and you're going to get pounded for 3 months. So they're very different atmospheres and challenging. But when you conquer them, and I'm lucky enough to have played in the series in both India and Australia when we've won, they turn on themselves, especially the Australians. They turn on themselves. And that was the overriding memory that I have of that tour in 2010-11, that Australians really respected the way that we played. They loved the fact that we were beating Australia because they love winners. Australian people and the culture there is winning, and that's why they're so good at sport, especially cricket. But when you are the team winning down there, they almost come on your side. So we'd walk into a bar in the first 2 weeks of a tour or a restaurant, and everyone would be saying it's going to be a long summer, you're going to get hammered. And by the middle of the tour, when we were winning, and especially in those last 3 weeks of the tour when we won in Melbourne and Sydney, the tide was completely the other way. You'd walk into a restaurant or a coffee shop and people would say, "We love you guys. It's amazing that you're sticking it to the Australians. Like, we love the way you're going about it." So we were almost treated as the home team. So it was this amazing experience. And it completely flew in the face of everything that everyone told me before because of their experitions previously.
Actually, I remember you doing the sprinkler dance at the MCG, having secured the Ashes in 2010-11. They were the only people in the ground with the Barmy Army. All the Aussies had left, hadn't they? Gone long before.
Well, you remember that first day? Remember the first day at Melbourne?
98 all out, yeah.
98 all out, and you turn up to the MCG, and I wasn't playing. I got dropped the day before. So I had this weird mix of emotions where I was turning up to this amazing ground to experience this amazing thing, which is a Boxing Day test. And I felt a bit detached from it because I was a bit sulky because I was left out, and I was desperate to be out there. But when you get there, it's 95,000 people baying for English blood. They want to celebrate Christmas by putting some English heads on stakes. But by tea time, the place was empty. And the only people that were left were the Barmy Army. And that was day one of the test match.
How did you deal with people coming up to you in a bar or coffee shop in the first few weeks and say, you're useless, you're going to get pumped? Do you just bite your lip and just, nice to see you, and we'll see how it goes? Or do some people sort of bite back?
There's the odd bite back, I'd say, yeah, from some of our more senior players, and maybe the more confident players within the dressing room. But yeah, you kind of just laugh at it because it is the caricature that you expect. It is exactly that. So yeah, I wasn't quite as confident as maybe I would be now if I was in that situation at 36 years old. I was a wet behind the ears 21-year-old who was just down there experiencing everything for the first time. So so I certainly bit my lip, but especially someone like Graham Swan was a touch more witty with them.
I remember it even as a journalist going there. I remember there was one incident at Sydney Airport where the guy with the sniffer dog who was like sniffing my suitcase, and then he was saying, "Why are you here?" And I explained to him. And he said, "Mate, you just might get back on the plane. Your team are useless. You're absolutely hopeless. You might as well just go back." And I'm just reporting what's happening. There is that kind of like that barrage that hits you. I mean, he said that it is a fantastic tour. And the weather's fantastic, and there's so much associated with it. Is brilliant. But you've got to be a winner, haven't you? I think that's the key to it. Otherwise, it just gets on top of you and then kind of like just forces you down and down and down. Well, you experience that as a player, but I mean, even as a journalist or as a reporter, you want the series to be competitive. Otherwise, it's the same old story you're sending back to the UK, and people get fed up listening to it after a while.
And I think that's why I'm really optimistic this time round, is because I look at the teams in 2013-14. We were a good and confident cricket team, but we didn't go there to embrace the culture. We weren't allowed out. There were loads of like stringent rules about what we could and couldn't do because it was just about winning. And I think that we didn't go down there and enjoy being in Australia. 2017-18, I thought we played meek, timid cricket and got hammered then. The same in 21-22, the COVID series. It's difficult to judge that really, but you look at the lineup that England had, it wasn't one that was going to puff its chest out and push back against Australia. Whereas I look at this lineup and I look at the attitude with which they play, and I see a lot of Australian people getting on board the way that England will puff their chests out and not be bullied, because I think that for the last 15 years or 14 years since we won in 2010-11, we've been bullied when we go to Australia, and I don't think this team will let themselves be bullied.
It's been interesting actually listening to a few Australians saying, they love the way that England play. I think Adam Gilchrist saying, well, that's how, Bazball, well, that's how we used to play. And, I love it. Bring it on. It's actually been, I think, a quieter week in the sort of Ashes preamble this week. I mean, the week before, everyone was having their say. Just couldn't wait. Ashes is coming. We've got to get in there and say something. This week has been just a bit quieter. We're waiting for the next person to really, I suppose, to pipe up and say something provocative.
I think Brad Haddin might have reared his head this week.
Was he?
Yeah, because as part of this book launch of mine, there's a story in there where during the first Gabba test, Haddin was getting stuck into me. He was saying that I was useless every time, and not when I was batting, when I was bowling. He was batting, I was bowling, which is unusual for the sledging to be that way round. But I'd bowl a ball, he'd hit me to deep cover or something, and he'd run past me, he'd say, "You're useless, you're rubbish." And I was like, fair enough, I wasn't bowling that great. I was sort of walking back to my mark thinking, yeah, fair point. And I got to tea time and I told some of the guys in the dressing room that, look, Haddin, I'm not grass, but Haddin's getting stuck into me every time I walk past him. And then some of the more senior players escorted Haddin out to the pitch after that tea break. And I think Stuart Broad told that story. It got clipped up and sent out there, and then Brad Haddin sledged him back, saying that Broady didn't say a word.
Yeah, you write about it in your book, actually, don't you? I think you said KP and someone else, Broady, was it, who sort of tried to
No, I
get
thought it was KP and Pryor. Yeah, I thought it was KP and Pryor that escorted him out.
Yeah.
But then Haddin said it was Collingwood, but I'm pretty sure it was KP and Pryor. Yeah, it happened. He sledged me and he did get escorted to the crease. But
he got 130, unfortunately, didn't he?
Exactly. I think it was 143 or something.
It's felt like a quieter week. It's felt like a quieter week, probably because the week before was just so noisy. But of course, the other thing, of course, that has happened this week in the lead up was the BBC poll of which players would make an Ashes combined side. I see Fox Cricket pick this up because I think it was the voters of to the BBC Sport website who actually voted on it. And there were 6 England players and 5 Australian players. And I think this has created a huge amount of derision in Australia. I saw a few people sort of criticising that it was the BBC poll. The BBC was saying this. But this is what happens, of course, is the truth gets mangled. It was just a poll conducted by the BBC. They were the conduit for it to defend my employers to some extent. So... Look, this is going to happen, isn't it? In the lead up to the first Test match, there's going to be so much of this. There's going to be more of it as well. I mean, is it good for the series, or does it get a little bit tedious after a while? And you just think, oh, come on, everybody, just be a bit more sensible.
Fills a space, doesn't it? Fills a few column inches.
Yeah, I think it's good for it. I listened to an interview, actually, I think it was on BBC View from the Boundary with Eddie Hearn, where he said he wants it to be more like a boxing match in the build-up to big Test series, where you sit in press conferences and slag each other off effectively. So, we're not quite there yet, but certainly I think any furore, any interest, any stories that can be told in and around a big series like this is important to keep it relevant. And the Ashes is the Ashes. It's the most amazing, challenging, rewarding thing to play in as a player, and I think everyone's just desperate for it to start now.
I think that's true, but I think actually it's something we could learn for other Test series in England. I mean, people talk about Test cricket sort of dying and all this, and obviously in England it's not. But actually, to try and make each test match in the summer an event where you have a proper build-up, a bit like, say, Wimbledon, where there's a sort of buzz about Wimbledon sort of 2 or 3 weeks before it actually starts. And I think you need that with Test cricket in England as well. It would help to really further its reach and appeal and engagement by just creating this incredible sort of it's marked as dream, isn't it? These sort of these conversations, these sledging going on off the field, um, all this kind of premeditated stuff. It's brilliant because it makes everyone salivate for the actual event.
Well, I thought what happened last summer is that actually happened naturally, didn't it, in the England versus India
England and India,
series?
yeah.
And that was, and so therefore it was more authentic. Yeah, the people would, some of the stuff that was going on the field, and it kind of built up through the series. Okay, it was quite intense because the games were back to back, but actually, I think authentic, kind of like authentic build up, really does get you excited, interested. But when Glenn comes out with 5-0. Well, I can understand that.
Well, Bumble's come out with 5-0, I think, now,
is
he,
he?
for England?
What,
yeah.
5-0 to England, is he?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. And Cookie's come out with 3-1, so, that's
right.
That's encouraging. Another member of the TNT team coming up. Sorry, go on.
Well, I take back what I said about a quieter week then. Oh.
Well, actually, I think one of the reasons maybe it's been quieter is because both teams have been playing this week, haven't they? England obviously playing their T20s in New Zealand, and Australia against India, the ODI series. We just have a little look at those games. I mean, England probably, did they learn much from those T20s? Obviously, the first game was washed out after England batted. The second game was a full match, and England got 230, I think, didn't they? I mean, a big score, and beat New Zealand by 60 runs, and that was impressive. And then, obviously, the third match, more or less a total washout. So, have England learnt anything from those 3 games that they can take into the Ashes, do you think, Vinny?
Maybe not necessarily they can take into the Ashes, but I think playing cricket and playing well as a group is important in the build-up to the series, and having good memories going into the series. So the fact that the one game that was completed, they did play so well. And the wider context of it beyond the Ashes is that there's a T20 World Cup early next year.
Yeah.
And looking at this England batting lineup and the balance that they have, the mixture of right and left-handers, the addition of Sam Curran as a left-hander in the middle order, I look at that batting lineup in particular and think that can do some real damage at that T20 World Cup. So important to gain momentum before the Ashes, but the wider context as well, I think, leaves England in a good place.
There was a shot that Harry Brook played in that second game off Mitchell Santner, who, right, isn't it? He's a good left-arm spinner, isn't he? And it was not really short. It was just fractionally, maybe 3 inches short of a perfect length for a left-arm spinner. Quite a quick ball, not too slow. And Brook just rocked back and whistled it not only over the deep mid-wicket boundary, but over all the marquees and out of the ground. And he looked back at his partner afterwards, Phil Salt, and I think he almost couldn't believe it himself that he'd hit it so far off a ball which wasn't actually at all bad, and that everyone was sort of slightly astonished, including Brook himself. I think it was almost such an instinctive shot, and it all happened in a flash. But I mean, he's got incredible ability, hasn't he, Harry Brook?
He's a special player, and that he's going to be key to England's fortunes in all formats, it feels, the way that he dovetails with Joe Root in the middle order of the Test match team and the 50-over team. And then the way that he captains and the way that he leads with the bat in the T20 format. So, we're very lucky to have him as a player. And he holds the key to a lot of England's fortunes throughout this winter, it feels.
Does he need, do you think, to think about, when you're playing in Perth, bit more bounce? Is he going to have to change his game? Is he going to have to sort of perhaps duck out of the way of? They're going to try and bomb him. If they have got any sense at all, the Aussies, they're going to bomb him. What does he do? Does he take it on? Does he sway out of the way? Does he, take stock? I mean, what do you think he needs to change at all in his method?
Not necessarily change, I don't think. I think temper it at certain stages is important, and I think that actually England did that pretty well in the summer. I thought that they tempered the way that they played to suit the game situation better than we've seen before. Think of that partnership between Duckett and Crawley at Headingley that won them that test match, the first test match up there. And the way that Brook played after he was dropped in that test match. Oh, sorry, not dropped. He was out off a no ball, wasn't he? And then the way that he played to score that 100 to set that game up was outstanding. So, no, I don't think he needs to change, because that suggests ripping up the script and doing something completely different. But recognising game situations, especially in Australia, and the passages of play that there will be is going to be important. And if there is a situation that necessitates being able to sway and duck out of the way, like there would have been at Lords in 2023, when Nathan Lyon went off and then Australia just bowled bouncers in the hope that England would slog one up in the air, and they duly obliged and all slogged them up in the air. I hope that if we find ourselves in that situation again, that it's played differently. But I would never tell him to change.
Finny, did you play at Lilac Hill? Have you ever played on that ground?
No.
No. Okay. The only reason the only reason I bring that up is because that is where the Lions game is going to be played. I thought, leading up to the Ashes, the warm-up game between the Lions and England was going to be played at the WECA. And I was listening to Michael Vaughan talking about this the other day, that obviously what you want to do is replicate the conditions that you're going to play in the first test match as much as possible in the lead up. And I assumed they were going to play at the WECA, and therefore that's got a fast bouncy pitch. When you go to the Optus Stadium, similarly, I think they seem to be able to get some pace into that service. Michael was saying that the pitch at Lilac Hill it barely bounces sort of knee height there. So they've done us again, haven't they? The Australians in the preparation. Was it Len Hutton's famous comment in 54-5? The buggers have done us again. That was a game that actually they went on to win, but he thought they were going to lose it at the time. What about that? I mean, did that make a difference or not? If you play a warm-up game on a pitch where the ball barely bounces and suddenly you're into the Optus Stadium and the ball's flying around.
Yeah, I mean, it does make a difference, certainly. You want to be as familiar with the conditions as you possibly can when you go out there and play a test match, but I wouldn't say it's the be-all and end-all. I remember a situation when we were in India in 2012 where we were clearly would struggle to play against spin. And we played against an Indian select 11 or something where they didn't play a spinner. So on purpose, to make sure that we weren't able to practice against any spin, we played, I think, a 3 or 4 day game against this India select 11 that just contained like 5 very medium paces, and we just faced medium pace for 4 days. But you have to make the best of any situation that you're given. It's a shame that game's not at the WACA as well for the historical context, because I think that's a brilliant ground a fantastic ground to play at. But if England let that perturb them, then it would be a bad thing. So it is what it is, unfortunately.
Of course, your 2010-11, preparation, which was meticulous under the Flowers and Strausses. You actually, you played some warm-up matches, didn't you, against different state teams, and then actually the bowlers went ahead to Brisbane early, because in old days, what the Aussies would do, to allude to what Simon was saying, and also Len Hutton as well, it was you'd be sent to Tasmania before the first test in Brisbane, where it was 12 degrees and raining, and then have to play the first test at the Gabba, where it was 35 degrees and baking sun. So deliberately kind of making it difficult for England tourists. But actually, in your case, in that series when you won in 2010-11. You guys went early to Brisbane to prepare, didn't you, the bowlers?
Yeah, and that disparity between the conditions there was something that we were very conscious of, because it hits you like a train when you go to Brisbane for the first time. The humidity and the atmosphere, the heat around the place, it couldn't be further from what you would experience in Hobart. And it's definitely an element of gamesmanship. When people come and play here, we send them around the smaller grounds in the Midlands, don't we? And then all of a sudden they're in a big test match arena. It's just one of those things that does happen when you're touring, and that was quite ahead of its time, I'd say. Sending the bowlers 15 years ago, for Strauss and Flower to say, no, this is our bowling lineup. We know what they're going to be 10 days before the first test. We know what it's going to be. Let's send them there to go and get miles in their legs in the conditions that they're going to encounter in Brisbane.
And what did you do actually when you were there? What was the preparation for the bowlers?
Few beers, few balls. It was that's being facetious. No, we trained quite hard with the England Lions who were there at the time. So we'd go and bowl a couple of spells with the England Lions.
So what, middle practices or something, was it?
Yeah, middle practice style things. And then we'd recover and then do it again, and it was just tempering up to be completely ready to be able to bowl 25 overs on the first day of that test match. What we have to remember as well is that team only played 4 bowlers. We played 3 seamers and a spinner, which seems, when you look at the makeup of teams now and how important all-rounders are and how important Ben Stokes will be in this series, you look at it now and think, how on earth did we go to Australia and only play 4 bowlers, one of them being an off-spinner? But we did, and it worked, and you had to be fit to play in that team. So going to Brisbane early was definitely a part of that.
And of course, that's something England are kind of replicating this time round. Gus Atkinson, for example, was out in New Zealand already, and he's not playing in the T20. He didn't play in the T20. He's not playing in the one-day internationals, but presumably doing the similar sort of thing to what you were doing, back in 2010-11, and also Mark Wood's going out there, or probably out there now, and Jofra Archer, obviously, he's in the one-day squad. Josh Tongue as well. So kind of like it's very different, isn't it? What do you make of their preparation? Are they just making the best of the situation that they're confronted with, or is there some real planning behind this, in the sense that actually because the series is so intense that you kind of want to prepare in a relatively low-key way and not play all these matches against teams that perhaps are not that strong anyway, and might put a fast one on you by not replicating in any way the type of cricket you're going to get when the Ashes come around?
Yeah, I think they're making the best of the situation that they're in. I know there's a lot of frustration from players from a long time past that there's no real competitive warm-up games to be battle-hardened by that first test match. But I think what we miss and what we ignore is the fact that the calendar is so packed. Like from the end of the summer in 2010, we finished our last game of the summer in mid-September, probably as a international team, and then there wasn't another game until the 25th of November at Brisbane. So we had to play those competitive games because you'd been out of a competitive environment for so long. Whereas now the guys are in New Zealand playing ODIs, and they've got that competitive environment and competitive cricket to remain battle hardened, so it's not as necessary to have to play against the state teams. I actually agree with something that Michael Atherton said over the last couple of days, is it's such a shame that these one-dayers that are being played in Australia aren't England versus Australia as a precursor to the Ashes, because I think that would be amazing, like 2005. I completely agree with that. It would have been a great precursor to the series and great preparation to make sure that everyone on both teams is 100% by the time that first test match comes.
Good series, actually, isn't it? Australia-India. Australia won both the first 2 games. That was a tight game at the Adelaide Oval yesterday, which actually I watched a bit of. A young player for Australia came through there, Cooper Connolly, who I think sort of reminds me a little bit of Jacob Bethel, actually, as a cricketer. Left-hand bat, bowls left-arm spin, saw Australia home with a sort of cool 60-odd not out yesterday and a 2-wicket win. We'll look ahead to England's one-dayers after the break. We'll take a quick break, actually. And those one-dayers, by the way, they start on Sunday in Mount Maunganui. The second game's on Wednesday and the third match the following Saturday, all starting, I'm afraid to say, at 1 a.m. in the morning, and you can watch those on TNT. So we'll take a break, and afterwards we'll talk a bit more about the Ashes and about your book, Finny. So just before we get into talking about your book, actually, I just thought there's a couple of other sort of quite nice talking points in the world of cricket. One was, obviously, there's this other series going on, and just finished, actually, South Africa-Pakistan. A couple of interesting little talking points about that. Simon Harmer, the South African spinner who calls plays for Essex, has taken his 1,000th first-class wicket in that series, took 6 for, and that's quite an amazing performance. And by contrast, I was at the Cricket Media Club, formerly the Cricket Writers Club annual lunch yesterday, and I chatted to a journalist called Kamar Ahmed, who is 88 and has been covering Test cricket since the 60s. And I think he's probably the man who's watched the most tests of anyone still alive. I think he's watched something like 600 test matches. Anyway, he said that there is a player that played in that Pakistan South Africa test, the second test, Asif Afridi, left arm spinner, making his test debut at 38. So, they're quite interesting, talking points there. And all that, that other one, Simon, you raised the other day, West Indies in Bangladesh fielding 5 spinners. The first time a team was bowled their entire 50 overs in a one-day international with spin. And what a contrast to the West Indies of our era, the 1980s, when they were all pace.
Yeah, well, it's something I thought that I wonder whether teams would go with it, because sometimes you come up with pitches that just demand you just go with one type of bowler, because what's the point of using another? I know there's a bit of variation and all that sort of thing, and you might get a wicket as a result of that. But for example, I thought the Oval in the summer, and I think both teams thought that as well, was kind of like a 5-seamers pitch or whatever, 4-5-seamers pitch for the last Test match, and they just hammered away with seamers. So why not, if the pitch is just so obviously a spinner's pitch, why not just go with spinners? I remember I've told this story before, but it's a T20 match down in Cardiff between Somerset and Glamorgan in the old Blast. Back in the day, when Errol Sapaya took 5 for 12, I think it was, or 5 for 14, 5 for 12. I mean, Errol Sapaya, there's not a sort of much vaunted spinner, but the ball was turning square. And when they used a couple of pace bowlers, they would just smash. So I always thought that was a 5-spinner pitch that night when I watched that game. So why not do it? Actually, West Indies won the game on a super over. So, which also makes me think about Perth and the first Test match, this Ashes series, whether England go there and they say, well, actually, when you look at the past, I know Lion bowled some overs there last year, but that's because India got quite a few in the second innings. Is this really just hammer away with 5 seamers? So Ben Stokes and 4 pace bowlers. You adapt to the conditions. Stokes always says, I like to have a spinner sort of in my suit just in case. Some pitches, do they just demand 5 pace bowlers, like some pitches demand 5 spinners? Discuss.
Well, I kind of think that's why they've named Will Jackson the team, in case they find themselves in that scenario where they would like a spinner. Joe Root can clearly bowl spin, but his predominant job is to score as many runs as he possibly can at number 4. So I think the addition of Will Jackson in the squad as the second spinner is a kind of nod towards the fact that England think, especially in those first 2 Test matches at Perth and then in Brisbane in the day-night game, that it could predominantly be an all-seam attack, and having Jacks as the spinner who might bowl 10 overs a day to fill in between and then strengthen the batting is probably a nod towards that, I'd say. So it's completely conceivable, yes.
But I suppose the only thing I would say about that is that if where does Jacks play? Well, he plays the spinner, so you have 8 batters. Was what I could see a scenario is where England plays Stokes, who's obviously one of their pace bowlers, excuse me, but also play 4 other pace bowlers as well. So you just rotate the 5 as opposed to just rotating the 4. Because sometimes when you rotate the 4, you get to a situation where, they're getting a bit tired. I just love to have an extra pace bowler here now rather than a spinner. So you can constantly rotate 5.
Well, they'll be losing a few World Test Championship points, won't they? If they do that with the over rates,
they will.
And I can't remember if I ever actually played in a 5-man seam attack. Probably only in warm-up games. But you feel like you're waiting forever for your next bowl, which is horrible. You could go an hour and 45 minutes in a session without being thrown the ball. Which is incredibly frustrating as a bowler. So yeah, 5 feels extreme, but it will also depend on how much Ben Stokes is able and capable of bowling. I think that will probably determine which way the coin lands on that one.
Yeah, well, I just think it might actually be a good thing for Ben Stokes. You say, he waits for a long time to bowl. Well, that might be a good thing for Ben Stokes. He just bowls short spells. Anyway, again, it's more actually speculation. We'll see how it pans out. But England, I suppose they do have those options, don't they? They could play jacks. They could play eight batters. They could play Shoaib Bashir and just go with that. Or they could play the five seamers. What do you think about five spinners, Finny, in extreme conditions? Does that not for the Ashes, obviously, but does that? I mean, is it a logical thing to do in the subcontinent? Play five spinners, or do you have to? Do you think you really have to have that variation just in case?
I would say you would want a seamer in there, just because when it's spinning so much, the ball becomes scuffed up because the pitch is so abrasive, and then reverse swing can actually play a part, which is really hard to hit, especially in those conditions. So I would want to give myself the option of a seamer, but also I played my last Test match in Mirpur in Dhaka, and it was just, I barely bowled. I bowled 11 overs in the entire Test match, and that was probably 5 or 6 too many. And we got spun out by Mehdi Miraz Hassan, I think his name is, who took 11 wickets and bowled us out in a session on that on the last day. So yeah, it's you have to play what's in front of you, but I would probably still pick one seamer just in case it reverse swung.
Can you explain why? You when you were bowling, at your best, you were bowling, close to 90 miles an hour. So you're playing in a Test match in Bangladesh, Dhaka, and your pace is ineffective. Your spinners are bowling most of the time. How is it? Can you just explain to the uninitiated, if you like, how is it that a 90 mile an hour delivery cannot have any impact on that sort of pitch? What happens?
I think if it's reverse swinging, it definitely can. And I remember a period in that Test match of maybe 10 overs where I think Woakes and Stokes bowled together, and the reverse swing was very challenging to face. So then pace through the air becomes very effective. But I just wasn't chosen to bowl at that stage of the game, which actually pissed me off at the time, because I was like, just let me bowl with the reverse swinging ball, please. I love it. But yeah, the fact that when it is flat and slow, where your pace is ineffective, I think it's mostly because people aren't scared about being hit in the head, because the ball doesn't get up to head high. And that's one of the fear factors of facing that kind of bowling is being hit in the head. So if it's not going to bounce that high and it reacts slow off the surface so you can get out the way if it is there, you lose a weapon in your armoury that makes you effective.
And I suppose also, because it's coming off slower, batters can adjust to any type of movement. And I think, from memory of bowling many times on flat pitches, you just feel innocuous. And I suppose that psychologically, that has an impact as well.
Yeah, and then you end up chasing your tail, and the moments that you get the ball, you're desperate to make an impact, and you snatch at that opportunity. You offer some four balls, and in a low-scoring game or a low-scoring Test match where you're trying to take wickets and offering four balls as a result of it, the captain's going to whip you out the attack. So, it all has a knock-on effect.
So you call your book, we should move to talk about your book, actually, because you call your book The Ashes Files, and you've obviously played all around the world and played in overseas conditions, different types. Why did you call it The Ashes Files? Was it specifically because it's coming out just before the Ashes, or was there another reason?
Well, that's very cynical of you, Simon, to suggest that I'd called the book The Ashes Files just before the Ashes. But no, I kept diaries on those tours. I didn't actually keep diaries on other tours, but I kept diaries on my first two Ashes tours, so 2010-11 and 2013-14. I wasn't there long enough in 2017-18 to keep a diary. I was there for about 4 days before my knee bust, and I went home. But those first two tours in particular, because of how big the series is, because of the pressure that you're under, because of how hard people told me it would be, and it was Angus Fraser who suggested that I might write a diary or a journal of how I was feeling and the things I was experiencing, that it felt important to write stuff down, to get it out of your head. When I look back on it now, it's amazing how unkind to myself I was in those times.
Hard on
and me and
yourself, actually.
Well, yeah, I mean, me and Simon Mand have spent a lot of time together working on for the BBC, and he probably understands my tendency to see maybe the slightly negative side of life, and that's something that I had in my cricket as well. So reading those diaries back, and then listing the excerpts in the book, is something that, yeah, I look upon it and think, how were you that mean to yourself throughout that time? But I thought it was necessary to be hard on myself to continue to get better at cricket.
Yeah.
And the reason it's called the Ashes Files is because there are excerpts from the diary within the book, so that they are the files.
When you wrote that, did you ever think you would turn it into a book, or was it just about trying to sort of come to terms with what you were experiencing at the time?
I think it was an attempt to come to terms with what I was experiencing. I never thought that they'd be in public view. The book starts with a letter that I wrote myself while sat in the departures lounge of Brisbane Airport when I got sent home from the 2013-14 tour. And I wrote that letter to myself to try and understand the situation that I'd got myself in, because this whole series in 2013-14, when I got sent home, was this whirlwind of emotions that when you're in it, it feels like everything's going 1,000 miles an hour. And that felt like the first opportunity on the tour that I had to sit down, removed from the pressure of selection, removed from the team environment where you're trying to keep a brave face on in front of everyone the whole time. That's the first time that I could sit down and be really vulnerable. And I like writing, and I found it easy to get my thoughts out onto paper. So, yeah, throughout that tour, it's just something that I felt like I had to do. I didn't ever think that they'd be in public view as they now are.
And when you look back, I mean, how much of it have you kind of? Oh, I can hear a baby. I can hear a baby crying in the background. You don't have to.
That's not
run
my
away
baby, I don't think.
Is it not?
Hold on.
Oh, it's stopped now. Well, it's not mine. They're all
It could
grown up.
well be mine. Maybe these headphones are just really good.
So how much did you have to edit what you wrote for publication, or is it kind of like the raw diary, or did you sort of have to tinker with it a little bit?
So the way that we use the diary throughout it is that when there is a quote from the diary, it's unedited. But what we also did was, because there was some stuff in there that it just wouldn't have added to the book to have the extract in there, that I used the diary and to evoke memories and evoke feelings, which was, it was a process that was difficult at times, because you're taking yourself back to these moments where you were just a vulnerable, what felt like a little boy at the time, doing something that should have been amazing and exciting, but something that you're finding exasperating and as though you're at your complete wit's end. So reconnecting with those memories wasn't easy at times, and Matt Roller, who I did the book with, has seen me cry many times throughout this process. When I was reading the audio book, there were certain chapters where I found myself crying, and the guy who was editing it and producing it with me was kind of looking at me thinking, God, this is quite a raw, emotional book. So touching base with those things was tricky at times, but also a process that when I sit back now and look at it, that it's finished, I enjoyed.
So the world famous, a world first is somebody recording an audiobook with a bunch of tissues next to them. But I mean, actually, it's interesting what you say though about the recall that diaries enable, because I kept loads of diaries, and when you read them back, it takes you back into that place, doesn't it? And you can sort of remember other things that happened that sort of spur your memory. I suppose my overriding impression from reading your book is that you thought very deeply about stuff which at times maybe hampered you, really, rather than just getting out there and playing. And I remember watching you bowl a lot, and seeing your head work, your mind working as you walk back to your mark, thinking, oh man, I didn't quite get my foot in the right position, or my arm's not coming over perfectly, or the wrist release or something. I can remember seeing that kind of going on in your head, and you pretty much admit that in the book as well. Do you think that at times that sort of almost deep immersion in each ball held you back, perhaps?
Yeah, I think I bowled my best spells when I was completely free, and you're in this autonomous flow state of just getting the ball at the end of your mark. You have your routine, you flow through your bowling motion. You might have a couple of checkpoints. My ones when I was bowling well were keep my left elbow close to my left hip and follow through on the wicket. It was as simple as that. So they're two very basic cues that you can use that would stand me upright and mean that I could focus completely on what was going on at the other end. And I'm lucky. I found, though, I had those spells in Test cricket, and I think in the book I describe in quite extreme detail how I felt in those moments, and remembering those things make me smile a lot because it takes me back to great spells that I bowled in international cricket. But the flip side of being so aware of what your body's doing and thinking so much about it is that subconscious motion of bowling can be interrupted by your thoughts. And as someone who thinks quite a lot and who did think quite a lot about the game and about my bowling, when you interrupted that motion or that flow, it would then impact you negatively. So yeah, if I didn't think so much about it, do I think that I'd have been a better bowler? Probably.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's learning, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
I can remember a spell I bowled and I was thinking about every ball and I bowled absolute crap, and then I just tried to clear my head and think, just calm down, slow down, just clear your head. And it's amazing how different it is. You had cues sometimes, I think, looking at advertising boards to sort of clear your head from what had happened the previous ball.
Yeah, I did that throughout my whole career, and I don't know how I started it. I just I remember when I was younger, I felt I had a rhythm at the back of my mark where I would always do the same thing, and it kind of just reset my mind and reset the ball to try and forget what had happened and focus completely on what you were about to do. So I found that getting the ball from the mid-off or mid-on before I walked past my my bowling mark was my first one. I'd then walk back, I'd loop round, I'd shine the ball, I'd peel off 3 boundary boards that I'd picked out before the game. That would clear my mind to then just turn and bowl again. It's just something I did throughout my whole career.
See, Simon, you're always taking the piss out of me because of being late for that NatWest final. Turned up almost when the warm-ups were over and just had to go straight out on the field. Well, that's the best way to approach a final because you're not thinking too much. You just got to get out there and bowl, and it worked perfectly. So you see, it's a good part of the master plan.
What was your excuse, Yoza?
Just bad traffic and bad planning.
Bad traffic.
Bad traffic
I'll
and
tell
bad
you what-
planning.
I'll tell you what his excuse was, Finny, in just slightly more detail. People, the regular listeners to this podcast will know, Yoza, who lives in West London, did not realise that the Notting Hill Carnival was on. Who could possibly miss that? The Notting Hill Carnival happens every year. Traffic clogged up all around the area. Yoza, living in West London.
I got to the ground at 10:15 for a 10:30 final. Yeah, that wasn't good. Captain
It's the best way to do it. It's the best way to do it.
I think it is. I actually think, and I actually took 4 for 30, and I thought, I've got man of the match here. And then Ramps came out and played a brilliant innings, age 16, 17, and he won man of the match. So I was done.
That's actually where I get frustrated when people criticise Stokes and McCullum for the way that they approach cricket now, because I think it's a lack of understanding of exactly that it is a game that has so many intrinsic and intricate details to it that if you overcomplicate it, you become far worse at it. If you overpractice, you become far worse at it. So I think the way that they approach it in trying to clear players' minds and allow them to be free when they go out there, I think makes them or helps them get the best out of players that previous regimes may not have done. So it frustrates me when people are super critical of the way that they approach it.
So it sounds like you think you would have thrived under their leadership. Not that you didn't before, but you thrived under Flower and Strauss, who were sort of meticulous planners.
Well, I did, and that was necessary at the time because of the characters that we had in the team. It was definitely necessary for us to have that strong, hard leadership style because the players needed direction and discipline in order to achieve what we wanted to. But I look at myself as a character and as a player, and I really responded well to the way that Trevor Bayliss and Paul Farbrace coached in 2015 onwards. And that was far more, go out there and be yourself. I want you to have the mindset of taking wickets all the time. I don't want to put guardrails up to that. Whereas the Flower Strauss mode of leadership was very much control with the bat, control with the ball, and if you didn't offer that, you'd be out the team. And I fell foul to that a number of times inside the first 2 or 3 years of my career.
Well, yes, I mean, because I was just going to pick up on that. I mean, one of the sort of most emotional bits of your book is when you, having played the first 3 tests of that 2010-11 series, you get to Melbourne, MCG, Boxing Day, huge game. It's 1-1, isn't it, the series at the time? And you see Strauss walking towards you before the game and asking to have a word with you. And I think I imagine there's this sort of horrible feeling in the pit of your stomach just before that moment.
Yeah, so the way it works is the day before the game, the captain will go around and he'll tell people whether they're playing or whether they're not. When you've played well, you just know that you're going to be in the team, so the captain says nothing to you. When you're out of the team and you know you've not really got a chance of playing, the captain will have a quiet word and just say you're not in for tomorrow. But if there's a big decision to be made, which dropping me after 3 tests would have been quite a big decision for them, in terms of dropping someone after 3 tests of a series, the captain will walk towards you after practice the day before the game, and he'll say, and you'll see him across the room because you know when you're vulnerable to being dropped. So you're not stupid. I wasn't oblivious to the fact that I'd gone around the park a bit in that 3rd test and we'd lost it. So I knew there was a chance. But yeah, you see him coming from his spot and he's just beelining towards you. And it's obviously an awkward conversation for him as well. But yeah, in that moment, I thought, oh shit, I'm struggling here. And then he comes over and he says, "Can I have a quiet word in the away from the main bulk, the main room of the dressing room, which more often than not happens to be either the toilets or the showers." So he took me into the toilets and he said, "Look, I'm sorry, but you're not going to play tomorrow in the Boxing Day test. There are 3 reasons. I don't think you bowled very well in the last test match. You look tired, and we don't think these conditions suit you." He said two of those 3 things will be different in the next test match, meaning that I won't be tired and the conditions won't be as they are in this test. You have to do your best to make sure the 3rd is right, that you're bowling well. And that's it. And yeah, and then I disappeared into the actual cubicle, had a quick cry, and then came out to face my teammates.
And actually, that was on Christmas Day, wasn't it?
Yeah, Christmas Day, yeah. Merry Christmas.
And when you were
that's Simon Mann's that is Simon Mann's dream of Christmas. He'd love that.
Well, Christmas is always the worst day of the year anyway, so you might as well be dropped for the Boxing Day Test match on Christmas Day as any day. Listen, Finny, I've got one final question that I want to ask you, and that's this: that you talk about this kind of like the introspection. You wrote this diary. We look at sport. I think a lot of people look at sport. Some people see it as quite glamorous, and you look at the Australians; they all seem teak tough, and ready to go and have a go at the English, and England are kind of trying to be confident and going to Australia. Do all players have these kind of doubts and these moments when they're in the hotel room and they doubt themselves and doubt their ability, or are there some players who are able to rise above that? And what you see from them, I'm thinking of players like perhaps someone like Joe Root, who just knows his game so well now that he won't be having those kind of doubts and introspection. Or will he be going to Australia thinking, do you know what, I haven't got 100 in Australia, and it's sort of gnawing away at him?
I think cricket lends itself to that level of introspection because of the amount of time that you have to be able to sit around and think. I always compare it to football or rugby, where you're out there for 80 minutes. It all happens within a flash. And and then you're off again. Whereas cricket, you've got 5 days, especially Test cricket. That's one of the most challenging elements of it, is being able to sit with your thoughts and think deeply about the game in the moments that you're not performing, but then make sure that your mindset is completely right by the time that you come to having to do your skill again, and then the period in between games as well. So cricket is definitely a game where that level of introspection is higher than others, I think. And the best players definitely have those periods, but the best players manage to find a way to quieten that noise in their heads to help them find the mindset that they perform best in when they're out in the middle. And that's something that I found a real challenge throughout my career, was finding that free mindset that I talk about in the book. And I hope, but by the way that I describe things, it's a window into what it's actually like inside a player's head, obviously at the extreme end of the scale. But yeah, it's just, that's why I think Test cricket is the greatest game, because it challenges you in every single way, mentally, emotionally, physically, and there is no better feeling than being sat there at the end of a 5-day test, or even the end of a 5-test match series, being exhausted. You've got blood all over your socks. You've got the mental scars and of the battles that you've had throughout those 6 or 7 weeks. To sit there and have won at the end of that, there is no better feeling in the world, and that's why I love Test cricket.
It's good actually that. Well, I mean, that sounds great, and it's great to have a bowler, I think, who's a thinker and who really puts on paper the whole kind of psychological challenges of being a bowler, as well as the physical challenges. So, a really interesting book, The Ashes Files, by Stephen Finn with Matt Roller, published by Seven Dials, I think is right, isn't it? Which is part of Orion. Out next week.
6th of November it's out, yeah.
Okay. Right.
You can pre-order now. You can even pre-order a signed copy. I had to go and sign 1,500 of them the other day. So yeah, there are signed copies out there if you want one of those. Yeah, I'm really proud. I'm thankful for Matt for the work that he put in. He worked really hard to bring this together, and then together we went through and made it something that I think we're both proud of.
Well done, and you're now officially an author. So join the club. Congratulations. It's a good feeling, actually, having a book, and when you actually get your first copy and handle it and look at it proudly, it's quite a moment, actually. Good luck with that. Just one little thing to finish. I thank you, actually, because as I mentioned yesterday was the annual Cricket Media Club, former Cricket Writers Club lunch to celebrate and commemorate the achievements of the season. Chris Wokes was there, being given a special award for his contributions to the international game. And player of the season was Hazid Hamid, which is a great choice, actually. Nottinghamshire's captain, of course, who had a fantastic season with the bat as well, and won the championship. And one little award which won't have necessarily got much publicity was a special award, the Peter Smith Award. And Peter Smith was a fantastic cricket writer for the Daily Mail back in the 70s and 80s, covered many Ashes tours, actually. And the Peter Smith Award was given yesterday to a lady that the name won't be familiar to many people, but you two will know her, Diana Keane, who has been the production manager of endless TV productions of cricket since probably the 1970s. And she's kept us all in check. She's the sort of mother hen who's looked after everyone and made everything work, in fact, for probably 4 decades, and never ever complained, despite having to work with the likes of Geoffrey Boycott and others constant. And Boyks actually sent a lovely message saying, congratulations, Di, wonderful achievement. It was great working with you, and I count you as a true friend. From Boyks. Wow, special. Anyway, Di didn't even know she was getting the award yesterday. And it was a little celebration, actually, of 20 years since the 2005 Ashes. So we got together the production team from that series to sort of give her a cheer and see her get her award. It was quite a nice little touch. Anyway, so thank you, Di, for looking after us and getting my taxis on time.
Yeah, I work with her a lot. Yeah, every time I see her, she keeps saying, I'm going to retire. I'm going to retire. I must be working with you, yours, or Geoffrey.
Definitely.
And if she managed to get you somewhere on time, yours, then that absolutely, I mean, what a triumph that is. And there's a lot of people who work behind the scenes, a lot of people's faces you see on the screen and voices, but there's a lot of people who work behind the scenes who are unsung heroes. So that's fantastic for her to get that award.
And she's still got her phone ringtone is the Archers theme tune. So I can't sort of imagine a TV studio commentary box without that Archer's theme tune going off Di's phone, ringing every so often with someone wanting some, a taxi changed time or some, scheduled commentary stint changed or something. Because, I mean, nowadays, managing commentary boxes with all the kind of demands on a commentator, having to go to different channels and radio to TV and so on, it's actually quite a thing, isn't it?
It is. Right, I think we should end there. First One Day International on TNT, England, New Zealand against England, Mount Maunganui, Sunday morning, 1 o'clock in the morning, and then into breakfast time as well. So if you can't join the coverage during the night, it's the denouement will be in breakfast time with lots of highlights and catch-ups as well. Thanks very much to Finny. Good luck with the book, and we'll catch up in Australia. Thanks very much for listening, everybody. Goodbye for now.